It was supposed to be an ordinary summer afternoon. Sunlight glinted off the turquoise water, kids shrieked in delight, and the smell of sunscreen and grilled hot dogs lingered in the air. The community pool was our sanctuary, especially for my daughter, Emily. She's 10, uses a wheelchair, and finds the water to be the one place where she feels truly free. Floating, paddling, even just soaking, the pool gave her mobility and joy that the world on land often denied. But on that day, something snapped in a woman we all knew, a woman whose clipped tone and angry eyes had become a fixture at our HOA meetings. Her name was Karen. Karen was always a problem. She wore her entitlement-like armor, patrolling our neighborhood with a clipboard and a glare. She made it her personal mission to police the tiniest infractions, untrimmed bushes, loud wind chimes, misplaced recycling bins. But it wasn't just rules. She made people uncomfortable, particularly families she didn't like. And she had made it very clear over the past year that Emily and I were not her idea of neighborhood material. When Emily and I rolled up to the pool that day, I remember noticing Karen's SUV parked crookedly in the lot, its back bumper nearly grazing the painted lines. I didn't think much of it. She was often around, usually on the hunt for violations. But as I wheeled Emily to the ramp, I felt something different in the air, not just heat, but tension. Karen stood by the gate in her signature wide-brimmed sun hat and sunglasses, arms folded, lips pursed. Her whole body was rigid, like a coil waiting to spring. We tried to pass her without incident, but she blocked the entrance with her arm. "You're not supposed to be here," she snapped. I was taken aback. "Excuse me. You didn't reserve the pool," she said, pointing to a clipboard with a crumpled sheet of paper. "You can't just show up whenever you feel like it. This is a public HOA pool," I said as calmly as I could. "There's no reservation system. We've been over this." Karen narrowed her eyes. "Rules change. Maybe you should keep up." It wasn't worth the fight. I maneuvered Emily around her, making sure not to bump into her leg, even though I wanted to. Karen huffed and made a show of scribbling something down. We made it into the water, and soon the laughter and splashing drowned out my anxiety. Emily beamed as she paddled with her float vest. Her giggles were infectious. Other families arrived, a few glancing nervously at Karen, who was still pacing by the gate like a shark circling prey. But nobody wanted to challenge her. Everyone had learned the hard way. If you stood up to Karen, your mailbox might mysteriously get reported for code violations, your garden lights cited for being too bright. About 20 minutes in, everything changed. There was a sudden shout, sharp, angry. I turned and saw Karen arguing with a group of teenagers who had jumped in the deep end. They weren't doing anything wrong, just being kids. But Karen was furious, her voice rising above the ambient noise. "Get out. Now. I don't care what your parents said, you didn't check in." The kids ignored her. That seemed to push her over the edge. She stormed to her SUV, muttering under her breath. That's when I saw it. She reached into the trunk and pulled out a black duffel bag. I didn't think anything of it until she unzipped it and pulled out what looked like a handgun. My heart stopped. At first I thought, no, this can't be happening. Not here. Not her. But the glint of metal under the sun was unmistakable. People screamed. Some ran. Others froze. I looked at Emily, who was still floating, confused, not understanding why the world around her had turned to chaos. Karen raised the gun in the air and fired once, not at anyone, not yet, just a warning shot. The crack of it echoed like thunder off the concrete and walls. "I've told you people 1,000 times. She screamed. "You don't follow the rules, you don't belong here." She fired again, this time closer to the water. The crowd scattered. Parents scooped up their children and fled toward the far fence. Someone yelled to call 911. But I was frozen, trying to calculate how to get Emily out of the water safely. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling, her lips quivering. "Baby, it's okay," I said, though it wasn't. "Just hold still." I had to get into the water. I jumped in and swam to her, trying to shield her with my body while keeping one eye on Karen, who had now climbed halfway up onto one of the lounge chairs like she was trying to get a better vantage point. Emily was crying now, her float vest making it difficult for me to hold her tightly. Why is she yelling? She's just confused, I said, trying to keep my own fear from spilling over. We're going to be okay. Karen was still ranting, waving the gun erratically. This is my neighborhood. I've lived here 20 years. I'm sick of being disrespected. By now, sirens were faint in the distance. Some brave soul must have gotten through to the police. But seconds felt like hours. I looked around. Kids had left behind their towels and pool noodles. The concrete was scattered with flip-flops, sunglasses, and spilled snacks. The bright, happy place had turned into a war zone. I tried to move Emily toward the shallow end where the lift was installed, but the water dragged at us. Emily's hands clutched my neck. Karen spotted us. I told you this would happen. She started toward us, the gun pointed in our direction. I don't know if she meant to shoot or if it was all a threat, but that didn't matter. I placed my body between her and Emily and shouted, "She's just a child. Put the gun down." Karen hesitated. For a fraction of a second, I thought I saw something human in her eyes, regret, recognition, maybe fear. But it passed, and the rage returned. Then the police arrived. It was a blur of commands, sirens, flashing lights. Officers stormed in, guns drawn. "Drop the weapon," they shouted. Now. Karen froze. She looked around like she was seeing the destruction for the first time. Her arms dropped slowly. She set the gun down and raised her hands. Within seconds, she was tackled, cuffed, and led away, screaming about property values and disrespect. I collapsed on the pool steps, holding Emily close, sobbing into her damp curls. The day was over. The damage had been done. But it was only the beginning, of course. Here's an expanded part 2 of your story, continuing in a suspenseful and emotional tone, aiming for around 1,000 words. The first shot cracked through the summer air like a lightning bolt, shattering the laughter and splashing sounds around the pool into absolute chaos. Time didn't just slow, it collapsed. I turned instinctively, shielding my daughter Emily, who was still perched in the shallow end, her floaties bobbing in the gentle waves, confusion all over her sweet face. She couldn't run. Not even crawl away fast enough. And that knowledge stabbed into my chest like glass. Screams erupted from every direction. Mothers grabbing their children, teenagers leaping over the gates, lifeguards diving behind chairs. I froze for a second too long. I admit it. My body wanted to move, but my brain had shut down. The sheer shock of seeing Karen, HOA president, in a sleeveless sundress, standing at the gate with a small silver handgun in her shaking hand, was something I hadn't ever prepared for. She wasn't even yelling. That, somehow, made it worse. Her mouth was closed. Her eyes were blank. Emily called out for me. Then, "Mom," with a quiver in her voice that snapped me out of it. I launched forward, jumping into the water with a splash, scooping her up, and pressing her tight against my chest as I made for the far end of the pool. Another shot rang out. Louder this time. Closer. Bits of concrete burst from the pool deck. She was aiming. God, she was aiming. I slid behind the wide planter near the pool pump house, my breathing ragged, Emily trembling against me. She had no idea what was happening. Just that something was horribly wrong and Mom was scared. I could feel the heat from her wet skin, her small arms clutching my neck. I whispered over and over, "It's okay, baby. I've got you. I've got you." But I wasn't sure I did. More gunshots echoed, followed by yelling, someone shouting her name. "Karen, stop. What the hell are you doing?" A man's voice, familiar. Probably Tom, her vice president on the HOA board. Karen responded with another shot, this time upward, it seemed, based on the ricochet off the metal pool fence. She screamed something then, words I couldn't make out. But it wasn't rage. It was despair. Pain. Deep and old. There'd been signs, I realize now. All those meetings she ran with clenched fists and tight smiles. The time she nearly broke down over someone's uncut grass. The HOA emails with capitalized rants about order, and compliance, and the decay of standards. She always framed it as duty. But it wasn't just about rules. It was about control. Karen needed everything to be in its place. And when life didn't cooperate, she snapped. Someone was crying nearby. I peeked out. Little Marcus from the townhouse across the street was huddled behind a picnic table, bleeding from a scrape down his arm. No parent in sight. I couldn't stay hidden. Not if kids were still out there. I whispered to Emily to hold on tight, kissed her forehead, and prepared to make a run for it. My phone was back on the lounger with my bag. No way to call for help. But maybe someone else already had. I prayed the cops were on their way. I took a deep breath and bolted out from behind the planter, my bare feet skidding on the wet tiles. I reached Marcus, grabbed his hand with my free one, and pulled him close. We're going to hide, I told him. Okay. Be brave. He nodded through his tears. The three of us made our way to the changing room cabana, a small concrete structure that might at least give us solid walls between us and her. I ducked inside, bolted the door, and sank to the floor. Emily was still clinging to me, asking me in a whisper what the noises were. I couldn't lie to her. A bad lady, I said, brushing her soaked hair from her forehead. But she won't hurt you. I won't let her. Outside, it had gone eerily quiet. Too quiet. I pressed my ear to the door. I heard someone sobbing. Then Karen's voice, clear and trembling. You didn't listen, none of you ever listened. And then another voice, softer, pleading. Put the gun down, Karen. Please. You don't want this. I already did it, she snapped. They'll take everything anyway. The words made my blood freeze. Already did what? Then came a noise that haunts me still. The heavy click of an empty chamber. A pause. Then another. She was out of bullets. More shouting. Then footsteps running. Maybe someone tackled her. Maybe she gave up. I didn't know. But a minute later, I heard sirens, fast and sharp, growing louder. Police. Thank God. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Until someone knocked on the cabana door and identified themselves as a police officer. I stepped out slowly, holding Emily and Marcus, blinking in the bright light. The scene was surreal. Paramedics attending to those who'd tripped, fainted, or been nicked by debris. Kids wrapped in towels, crying into their parents. Karen, handcuffed, being led away by 2 officers, her head down. Her dress soaked. Her hands trembling. No one had died. Not today. By some miracle. But something broke in all of us that afternoon. The pool remained closed for weeks. No one fought the HOA about it. No one even talked about rule violations or pool passes anymore. Every meeting after that was quiet. Muted. Like we were afraid saying the wrong thing might crack something open again. Karen had a breakdown, we were told. A complete psychotic break. Apparently, she'd been under investigation for misappropriating HOA funds. Facing jail time. She'd been unraveling for months, and no one noticed. Or if they did, they didn't care enough to intervene. But I cared, now. Not about her guilt or innocence. But about the fact that my daughter couldn't run. That this neighborhood, with all its fences and flower beds, had nearly become a graveyard. For no reason that would ever make sense. Sometimes I catch Emily staring out the window toward the pool. She doesn't remember the sound of gunshots. But she remembers me holding her, whispering to her, running with her. And that's something. It's everything.